So I think when you look at first of all, the Eagles' big win by trading down. You pick up a first-round pick for moving down. I think they're doing the right thing. I know at this time of year, we all think we know these players really well, and we think we can predict how things are going to end up. And the fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, these guys are all rookies. They're going to come into the NFL, and we don't really know how any of them are going to turn out. So when you can pick up that extra first-round pick, I personally love it.
We are Birds 365. John McMullen, Jordan McDonald, a.k.a. the Mac and Mac guys. We are here talking football with you every single day. Certainly Eagles, the most important Birds football conversation, but we cover the league as well. And the entire league will come together 3 weeks, slightly over 3 weeks, 3 weeks and a day from now for the NFL draft. Our next guest is going to give us some more insight to it, and I like the way he does it. I had him on my show last year up on CBS in New York. I did so again just a couple of weeks ago, and good enough to hop aboard with us today. He puts out the Sports Info Solutions, the FISIS Football Rookie Handbook, the combining of scouting and analytics. Matt Manucharian joins us here on Birds 365. Matt, Jody Mack, and John McMullen here. How you doing today, bud?
Hey, guys, I'm doing good. Thank you for having me on.
Thrilled to have you, Matt. Appreciate you coming on. Wanted to, obviously, we're Eagle-centric here, so I want to start at number 12 overall. The Eagles kind of fell back from number 6 with the trade. Pretty clear indication they couldn't get the quarterback they were interested in, which was probably Zach Wilson. And then potentially didn't like the value of maybe the receivers at 6. So this team has a history of looking at offensive and defensive line. Do you think there will be that kind of value up front in the trenches, so to speak, at number 12?
So I think when you look at first of all, the Eagles' big win by trading down. You pick up a first-round pick for moving down. I think they're doing the right thing. I know at this time of year, we all think we know these players really well, and we think we can predict how things are going to end up. And the fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, these guys are all rookies. They're going to come into the NFL, and we don't really know how any of them are going to turn out. So when you can pick up that extra first-round pick, I personally love it. In terms of who's going to be there at 12, I think it would be like a moonshot scenario for Penei Sewell. We've got him as graded as high as anybody in the draft. If he was there at number 12, then you talk about moving down and still being able to get him. Jackpot city right there. If it's not Sewell, the only other guy that I would consider from the offensive line or the defensive line to be a really good value right there would be Rashawn Slater, also offensive tackle. You could also slide him in at guard, but a guy from Northwestern who doesn't jump off athletically like a Penei Sewell does, but somebody that plays with body control, understands techniques, and he'll probably be a 10-year starter for you. So those are the two guys that I would say at that 12 spot I'd feel comfortable. After that, there's depth in the second half of the first round into the second and third round on the lines, which I think is good. It's a good way to build. But right at 12, I would be hesitant to take any of those pass rushers.
You mentioned big win by the Eagles with the trade back from 6 to 12. I understand the Eagles' philosophy, and I'm not saying I think it was a bad trade. Here's my only question. The Dolphins did it first. I know it was a 3-team trade, and one move kind of predicated the other. But the Dolphins moved from 3 to 12, and they got 2 first-round picks, future first-round pick, and a locked-in pick as well, whereas the Eagles got 1 future first-round pick and a move up around in this year's draft from 5 to 4, and they went from 6 to 12. It's 3 picks difference. The Dolphins went from 3 to 12. The Eagles went from 6 to 12. Yet there is a serious difference in the compensation package. When you compare the 2 trades, to me, it makes the Eagles trade look not as impressive. Why is it the Dolphins got so much more?
Well, I mean, I think if you look at the end of the day, the Dolphins at first got 2 first-round picks, but then they had to give one of them back to the Eagles. So they end up +1. The Eagles end up +1, really. I think what you're seeing is the difference between picking number 3 and number 6 is about equal to the difference between picking number 6 and number 12. Even though it's only a 3-spot difference to a 6-spot difference, where you are in the first round, you have a dramatic drop in value as you go from the number 1 pick down to the number 10 pick. That's bigger than the difference between the number 10 pick and probably the number 40 pick when you really talk about value. And whether you look at the Jimmy Johnson draft value chart or you look at more new school kind of analytics-based charts, you find that the value on the very, very top end of the draft, it tends to be a steep slope.
Especially when you're talking about quarterbacks, Matt. We all expect quarterbacks to go 1, 2, 3, and maybe even potentially for the first time in the Super Bowl era, 1, 2, 3, 4. At least there's a potential. But, big picture, I meant to ask you this first. As a guy who's been doing this and been scouting players for a long time, how much more difficult has it been this year with the pandemic, the no combine, the pro days? I never saw so many 4.3s in my life, man. They don't happen in Indianapolis. I mean, how much more difficult has it been to get real good concrete information?
Yeah, as a scout, we're pretty well aware that any pro day times are not, you can't take them to the bank like you can those combine times. The combine times, the great thing about it is it's consistent for everybody. No matter if the laser was messed up, it's messed up the same way for everybody. So you got apples to apples. Pro day, it's all over the place. So I think as a scout, I never really cared too much about pro days. I think at that point, you're pretty locked in. You've been through your draft meetings. You've been watching these guys for 3, 4, 5 years of college football. So in general, I hope nobody misses those pro days too much from a scouting side of things. I think it's more the GMs and the coaching staff that had other priorities during the college football season that probably lose a little bit more of the information. But how good is that information anyway? We're talking about pro days instead of what actually happens on the field. So getting back to your original question, yeah, this year's really hard. And it's not because of the lack of pro days. It's because of the lack of football games last year. So one guy in the football rookie handbook that we just talked about, Penei Sewell, didn't play any college football this past year. You got 2 years of film on him as an 18 and a 19-year-old. That's a tough thing to project out forward. Now, luckily, he was playing at a top level already. But what if you have somebody like Jalen Mayfield out of Michigan who just played 2 games, and on another offensive lineman just played 2 games last year? Well, he played great in those 2 games. He looked like a different player than he was in 2019. But it was just 2 games. Can I really go off of those 2 games as an eval, or when I'm looking at my statistics or anything else? Fact of the matter is that there's just much more uncertainty this year than there is in a typical year. So it's very difficult. And the most difficult thing is understanding the uncertainty this year relative to a normal year, because uncertainty is something that we already don't have a really great sense of as scouts and as a league, right? People do a bad job. They trade up too often, like we were talking about before, because everybody overestimates what they know about the scouts in a typical year. So we know less than we know in a typical year now, but it still doesn't mean that we know we still have to calibrate that based on a normal year, like based on what we usually know. And that's something we don't have a great sense of to begin with. So I think that there's a chance that teams that really have an understanding of value can potentially find ways to maneuver, right? I think everybody knows the top 100 is good this year. As you get into the depth of the draft and undrafted free agents, it's just not the same level of player that's going to be there. Theoretically, that says let's value those high picks more than those late picks. But at the end of the day, just because we're going in one direction from where we were last year doesn't mean that where we were last year was a very good North Star to begin with.
We've got the editor of the SIS Football Rookie Handbook, Matt Manicherian, here with us today. Excellent reference tool for the upcoming NFL draft. Matt, I'm going to ask you a scouting question. Pretty big story over the last several days. Big media member Dan Orlovsky of ESPN said on one outlet, the sources were telling him Justin Fields, the highly thought of quarterback from Ohio State, might not be the hardest worker in the world, that he's not the first guy in, last guy out. He's more last guy in, first guy out as far as putting in the time, putting in the effort, working on his game, both on the field and in the study room thereafter. It got off into a racial conversation, which I'm not going to bother with today or bore you with. Who do you get that type of information from? You're a scout. You're trying to find out about a kid. You want to know what their work attitude is. Do you trust their coaches? Do you trust their teammates? How far back do you go to high school or before that? When you're trying to get a grasp of the young man and how dedicated he is to his craft, how do you go about getting your hands on that information?
You leave no stone unturned. Hands down, you leave no stone unturned. Now, what Orlovsky was doing, he's playing a media game that's happening right before the draft. I don't blame him for it. I don't think he's racist, but I think that reporting things that you're hearing this time of year, you're as likely to be reporting a smokescreen as you are to be reporting actual information. Now, as a scout, I'm in there like I said, I'm in there since these guys come in as freshmen going into these schools. So my region as a Northeast scout went to every school from Maine down to Virginia Tech, over to the west to Pittsburgh. So I have to have all of those schools like the back of my hand. I'm not just a super fan for each of those schools. I'm a super fan plus an expert plus a stalker combined for all of those schools. And you think I'm joking. At one time at the University of West Virginia, we had a pass rusher that we were really interested in, and I got mixed messages. I would go on campus, and I got to be frank, the coaching staff at the time there were not very helpful. So I would go to the usual suspects, right? The position coach, the head coach, the athletic trainer, the strength coach. These are the people that are kind of the bread and butter at every school, right? You'll talk to whoever's the assigned pro liaison. They'll give you whatever the head coach wants you to hear on a basic sense. But as you get to know the position coaches, the academic people are great because they don't have the same kind of tie to the football program, right? Everybody in the football program wants these guys to get drafted high. It's good for their jobs. Academic person doesn't necessarily care. But one time in West Virginia, I was unsatisfied with the responses. I was getting inconsistent things. And I got some intel that a guy that we were going after loved to hang out in a particular bar. So I posted up in Morgantown for about a week and, doing report writing, not totally just skipping out on my job, but I posted up in this bar most of the time. And sure enough, I waited around. And when it came Saturday night, this player was in there in the bar, post-game partying, and I was able to observe this person. So when I said stalker before, I really wasn't kidding. As a scout, you'll do this sort of thing. You're almost a private investigator sometimes. And the people that give you the best intel, if you can find the female athletes on campus and you can gain their trust just a little bit, the female athletes tend to date the football players and they get real honest real quick when you start talking to them. So if I was really trying to dive into Justin Fields, I don't care about what Orlovsky's hearing from his media connections. I want to get on the campus and I want to find out people that these kids actually interact with.
Well, that's true. If I knew, Matt, if I knew Julie Ertz before Zach Ertz, I would have known everything about Zach. But, so you're right. You hit the nail on the head. I got to talk to Greg Russo. I think he's an interesting prospect because he didn't have a great pro day. And he was one of those guys who was phenomenal pre-pandemic at 15 and a half sacks, didn't play. So he's in that category. But he did spend a lot of his time working out with Chuck Smith, the ex-Falcons pass rusher who does a great job as sort of a personal tutor with pass rushers. I'm interested to know how you guys view that. Like, obviously, everyone says you can't replace live reps, but if you're working just on your fundamentals, your technique with a guy people really respect, Jalen Hurts with Quincy Avery, somebody like that at the quarterback position, but Russo, as I mentioned, with Chuck Smith, can that help in a weird way more than, say, getting 15 sacks in a poor ACC if it's a bunch of bad teams at least at the bottom end of the conference?
Yep. I think Jalen Hurts is a great example because I think a lot of people were able to really gain some trust in what Jalen Hurts was, not just because of what he did at Alabama and Oklahoma, but because of people were able to kind of track what he was doing off the field. He's also very active in kind of the QB schools that people do, where you get the peer groups amongst NFL players. And when you have other quarterbacks telling you, I like working with this guy, I like working out with him, and you're talking about pros that are doing that is meaningful. I think about Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase didn't play football this year. I couldn't care less. He was training. He's clearly got his body into great shape, and he's ready to go. And we saw all the production that we needed from him 2 years ago. Now, with the Greg Rousseau, I think it's interesting because it's been so limited what we've been able to see. Yeah, he had double-digit sacks in really his 1 year of college football, but you're talking about a 19-year-old who hadn't even really figured out his whole body yet, and he had a lot of kind of scheme sacks. Miami was pretty strong from an edge rush perspective, and he was finding from a matchup perspective a bunch of those were unblocked sacks and things like that. So when we did the film evaluation of Rousseau, it was really difficult for us because you see things where the physical traits are all there, so check that box. The production is there, so check that box. But we don't believe that he's actually using his traits to create that production in a way that's necessarily going to project. And man, if we could have seen him play this past season, we could have gotten a much better sense of, is this guy putting it together as he ages from being just tools and production to tools and production that'll actually project to something on the next level. I get a little concerned when he doesn't work out well, because I think everybody was expecting him to work out better. But at the same time, if as a scout, I don't have a relationship with Chuck Smith, if I did, or if as a GM I did, or a head coach I did, I would try to know over time. When I talk to Chuck, does he just say he loves everybody, or does he give me the real deal about these guys? And it's those guys that give you the real deal. I think that's where you can start to parse out these things of, hey, I didn't have the film, so I don't know about Greg Rousseau. There's nobody more boom or bust than Greg Rousseau in this draft. So you want to try to fill in those blanks as much as you can. It's not as good, but it's not a death sentence either.
Matt, when you're good enough to send me off your rookie handbook, I went through it, checked out some rankings of the players at specific positions. When I had you on my CBS show, I told you about a guy who grabbed my attention. I did not think Kylan Hill was a running back who deserved or merited being the fourth-ranked running back in the draft. I remember watching a couple of games. He played Mississippi State, made a couple of plays. I said, really, he's the fourth-best running back? I did go back and watch some YouTube highlights and videos of him. He is pretty impressive. I think you've got a pretty good read on him. He was a guy who walked away from his team this year. New coaching staff, he said it was COVID-related. Others question if that's the case, or he's just unhappy with his role on the football team. Very talented, very skilled, questionable attitude. I know other people who put out mock drafts and the like don't have him ranked as highly as you. What did you find out when you tried to do that investigative research on Kylan Hill? I know you're a editor/scout now. When you were a scout, you did it much more detailed, but I'm sure you try and add some of those elements to your rankings. What's the deal with Kylan Hill? Talented player. Where do you think he's going to go in the draft? Where should he go in the draft?
Yeah, so it's a good point. When we do our reports, we try to split everything out as separately as we can. So we try to put the scouting and silo it. We try to take the analytics, put that in its own category. The injury risk, we try to put that away in its own way, and the character stuff too. And as you mentioned, I'm not a scout anymore, so I'm not going on the road from school to school with these relationships. It's really hard for me to speak on Kylan Hill. The amazing thing is all these other mock drafters out there, they want to say that they have an opinion on it, and I think it's all just hearsay at this point. So the football rookie handbook, really, we're not counting any character stuff in there, and even in terms of injury stuff, we're really stripping that out when we talk about the draft grades. With Kylan Hill, what you get excited about is his ability, his contact balance, his ability to stay on his feet throughout contacts. He's got explosiveness and burst, and he's been a guy that's played in a zone scheme in his college career and been really effective with it. He's got good instincts as a zone runner. What do we mean by that? That means instead of it's I got you as a blocker, it's the whole offensive line is kind of moving in one direction together, and the running back has to have the vision to see the holes. We like his vision. We like his ability to fit in on first and second down and be a real handful for the defense. Don't see him as a 3-down starter immediately. That's the thing that really needs the digging in. If you think he can be somebody that can also develop into a receiver who's a really good somebody who can catch the football really well, 66 catches over the course of his college career, not exactly Christian McCaffrey type production. So the question is, can you develop him into that third down player, or is he just a first and second round back? In which case, I think he's in the same category. Yeah, the rank is number 4, but the grade range, he's right there with the kind of glut of running backs after you get past those top few guys.
Hey, Matt, I wanted to get back into some of that you were talking about Dan Orlovsky, whether you want to call it silly season. You do get, as a reporter, I can tell you, we get, information that is obviously one way, because personnel executives want to point us into a certain direction, create a smokescreen. Two names I've heard at the quarterback position outside the top 5 that people in this league think could potentially develop into a starter. I don't like the term rising and falling because I don't think people rise or fall. I just think we get more information.
Right. 100%.
But the two players I keep hearing are Kellen Mond from Texas A&M and Davis Mills from Stanford in that second tier. Is that a fair assessment? As the potentials, obviously, you talk second and third round picks at quarterback, you got to get lucky. But do those guys have that type of long-term potential?
So in this year, I think there's a real drop off after the first 5 quarterbacks. Some years you find situations where there's just 1 or 2 or 3, maybe 0 quarterbacks that you really get excited about. But there are guys that are deeper that you say, man, if I could have a chance with that guy, he's somebody I'd be excited about. In this year's draft, it really is, you said tier 2. I think tier 1 is Trevor Lawrence. Tier 2 is Wilson and Fields, and tier 3 is Jones and Lance for me. So I think we're already in tier 4. And then, yeah, I get to the range of, I would throw Kyle Trask in the same mix as these guys in terms of their tier, Davis Mills and Kellen Mond. They're both guys that I think have significant holes in their game that I wouldn't like to have either of them on day 2. I would probably stay put if I couldn't get any of those top guys. I don't think they're a Jalen Hurts type player where Jalen Hurts had issues in his game, but at least you saw the role that he could fit in with and kind of the vision for what he could become as a player. With Mills, he's the one that I would probably start with. He's the one that I like a little bit better. You see natural talent there and an ability to kind of get the ball around the field with nice short accuracy. Where things get a little bit tougher is he has a tendency to stare down. You would have liked to see more development. It's very difficult watching the Pac-12 football this past year. It wasn't the same level of football that we're accustomed to seeing in other places. So the ability to get the ball down the field, to keep his eyes down the field as things are breaking down around him, just not an extremely high level of possession. When you look at some of the advanced statistics, we have him as an 86 in terms of his rating. That's kind of like a Madden rating, sort of, based on the statistics. And, all these other quarterbacks are performing in the 90s regularly. So it's a little bit of a step back. But in terms of a guy that has a chance, he's a guy that has good completion percentage, can spread the ball around. You don't see any obvious flaws in terms of he doesn't have the arm talent. He doesn't have the size. But I think it would be a little bit of I think he projects as a backup. And it would be a little bit of a reach to say you're going to start this guy in a hurry. And Kellen Mond, I throw in the same sort of boat. I think the quick release, the ability to get the ball out, the ability to kind of manage the offense, but inconsistent, doesn't get the ball downfield. If you talk to fans of these guys at these schools at Stanford or Texas A&M, guys that watch all the games of all of these schools, you don't find a lot of people that are saying, I've been watching him for years and I think he's Dak Prescott. You don't really find that with these guys. You find a lot of, I was frustrated with him as a quarterback. I don't understand really what's going on in the NFL. So these guys, they have a chance because they have some of the traits, but I wouldn't bet on either of them.
Matt, last thing, and appreciate you coming on with us today. Since Johnny Mac took you to quarterback, I'll follow up there. Next year's quarterback class. I don't know how much you put into evaluating a draft class a year and ahead, but it's kind of important here in Philadelphia because Eagles got an extra first-round pick by sliding down. Jalen Hurts is an improving commodity. It's kind of a prove-it type year. The Eagles may very much be in the shopping for a franchise quarterback in next year's draft. You sung the praises of the 5 guys who are at the top of this year's. How does next year's class, if you formulated an opinion, knowing full well it's a year out, so it can change drastically between now and then, what kind of class are we looking at next year if you've already got a grasp on it in your opinion?
Yeah, I think this class is a standout class in terms of prospects. I don't know how many years you have 5 guys that are legit first round type guys. I don't expect that we'd have that next year. But there's one name that does come to mind that I'm already getting a little bit excited about. And for anybody who I went to college with at Duke, just you can leave the show right now. because it's the North Carolina quarterback, Sam Howell. Sam Howell might be everything that Ryan Pace wanted Mitch Trubisky to be when he came out of North Carolina. If you watched any of their offense this past year, it was very fun. We've got 2 running backs that are at the top of our running back boards this year. Those guys will be gone. So we're going to have to see a little bit what Howell can do without as many weapons around him next year. But this is a guy that spread the ball around, very athletic, all kinds of arm talent. And instead of just having 1 year of production, we're actually going to get to see him perform a little bit more in a way that we didn't with Trubisky when he was at Carolina. So despite the colors that he wears on his jersey, he's the guy that I get excited about when I look ahead. And I think he'll be a first rounder when all is said and done. But we got to see how he performs this year to get a better sense of how he's putting it together as we go, because he had a lot of talent around him this year. He's going to have talent around him next year, but he's going to have to really put the offense on his back and show that he wasn't kind of a one-hit wonder. So that's the guy I have my eye on. And
Matt had extra time this year because he didn't have to worry about watching the NCAA tournament with Duke. So he had that much more time.
What a shot, Joey. Hey, real quick, Matt, I gotta get one in on Trevor Lawrence. You mentioned he's the only tier 1. Where is he? I've heard best prospect since Andrew Luck. I've even heard best prospect since John Elway. Where is he over the years as a prospect when you compare to other drafts?
Yeah, he's in that tier. Of the last 3 drafts, he's by far the best quarterback that we've ever graded. This is the 3rd year of the Football Rookie Handbook, and he's got an all-pro level grade. He's as high graded as anybody in the book, not just quarterbacks, and he's higher grade than anybody that we've done. I think the guys you mentioned, the Andrew Lucks, the John Elways, and when you start to talk about quarterbacks like this, people like to use the words like can't miss and things like that. Fact of the matter is nobody's can't miss. We got to see what happens with Trevor Lawrence. But as a prospect, you can't find a real flaw. You got size, you've got athleticism, you've got arm strength, you got processing, you've got leadership, clutch ability, everything that we look for in a quarterback. Trevor Lawrence is putting it together. That doesn't mean he leads our statistics in every single category. That's certainly not the case. But this is football, and we've got to understand the statistics in along with the traits. And when you talk about guys that are at the Elway, Andrew Luck level, in terms of grading these players, it's kind of meaningless. Once you're that high a grade, you're that high a grade. So parsing between is Luck a better prospect than Trevor Lawrence? Hindsight being 2020, if you told me we only get 8 years of Andrew Luck or whatever, then I might bet on Lawrence to be a better prospect. But the sort of things that are going to separate which guy ends up becoming a elite level player and where guys fall off, I don't think it's in the mix of the traits that we've seen so far. The best we can say is he's really, really good. It's a little bit like when I was with the Saints and we would have our internal grades on Drew Brees. The scale went from a 1.0 being a reject to a 9.0 being the best player in the history of the NFL. Drew Brees' grades were anywhere from a 7.5 to a 9.0. And in actuality, those are the same grade. So I think that's kind of the category you're at with Trevor Lawrence. Anybody can be a miss, but there's no evidence that shows that Trevor Lawrence is going to be that guy.
His labor of love is the SIS Football Rookie Handbook, comprehensive scouting and analytics guide. It is a great tool for you draftniks out there, combining scouting with statistical analysis. Grab it before the draft. You got 3 weeks to get your hand on it. It is tremendous. We appreciate Matt coming on with us today. Enjoy the draft, Matt. Sorry for the Duke shot. I had to take it. It was a hanging curve. I had to take a swing at it.
I'm not taking it. I can't put it down myself in other years, so I better take it this year.
Matt, great stuff. Thank you for coming on. We'll talk to you again soon enough.
Thanks, guys.
Matt Manicherian, former NFL scout turned draft publication editor, here with us on Birds 365. All right, we got a timeout in here. Come back, put a bow on the show. You got the Mac and Mac guys, John McMullen, Jody McDonald on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.